Welcome to Second Take, the show that focuses on the issues behind the news. President Jacob Zuma's Infrastructure Commission met for the first time this week. Terence joins me to discuss the Commission's significance. Terence, welcome to Second Take. From where did the concept of such a commission arise and why?
Well, it was really from the mid-year cabinet Lekgotla, where I think there was a lot of soul-searching within government, especially around this target of 5 million jobs by 2020. Now, the real only game in town in terms of where government can sort of intervene in stimulating that growth and ensuring that it happens is to ensure that the public investment in infrastructure takes place. And we've had this promised over the last few years of between 860 billion and 1 trillion rand of public infrastructure into rail, water, harbours, ports, as well as power, which we are short of at the moment, as well as the social infrastructure around schools and hospitals and other healthcare facilities. But that has really not materialised over the last few years, and we've really seen a fall in the infrastructure spend in its relation to its contribution to gross domestic product. It's fallen to around 9% currently, and the trend is expected to fall further in the next 2 years to around 8%. Now we see that very much in the results that we're seeing from the construction industry. We had all the construction industry companies report over the last few weeks, and all of them are saying the same thing, that it's a tough environment, their margins are under pressure, the order books are really having to be bolstered from offshore. So we're seeing some order book growth from locally, but if you look at it closely, particularly the larger companies, they are having to go to Australia and elsewhere to boost their order book. And in fact, it's become a strategic intent and a strategic mantra out of all these companies that they want to move offshore more and more because the pipeline in South Africa is just not materializing. So this is something that government is aware of. They realised that this was the main stimulus, post-recession stimulus, that South Africa was going to engage in, upscaling infrastructure, getting Eskom and Transnet and others to really spend on their budgets. But year after year, you see that those capital budgets are not spent, and we're seeing that reflected both in the falling infrastructure contribution to GDP, as well as in the very poor results from our construction industry. And without these things, without the infrastructure, without the electricity, without the roads, without the water, everything becomes difficult in terms of growing this economy. The certainty is not there to invest if you're a miner, if you're a manufacturer. And we saw the disastrous figures yesterday, which, possibly had a lot of strike implications in them, but we really are not. Our real economy is actually in crisis.
What conclusions were reached at Thursday's meeting?
Well, the conclusion was to start operationalising the Infrastructure Commission. So they've elevated the issue to the level of the President. So President Jacob Zuma chairs the Infrastructure Commission. This commission will meet 4 times a year and really provide a sort of governance framework for officials and ministers to really do the hard slog. And that's really going to be led by a management committee led by Rural Development and Land Reform Minister Gugile Nkwinti will chair this with 8 other ministers, part of the management committee. There will also be provincial representation really through the Northwest Premier Thandi Modise, who will sit on the management committee, as well as local government representation through a representative from Salga. We didn't get many details yesterday because the announcement was overshadowed by the appointment of the new Chief Justice. In fact, the press conference was abandoned, and we didn't get the details that we were expecting from this very big meeting that took place the whole of Thursday at the presidential, or the whole of Thursday morning at the presidential guest house. But we get the sense that this is also going to be backed up by a secretariat of bureaucrats, and that they'll try lean and crowd in expertise as and when needed from the state-owned enterprises, the key infrastructure ones being Eskom and Transnet, as well as there's also a desire to look at these public-private partnerships that have been knocking around for so many years and whether we can start prioritising those. So what we should see in the next 2 months is that management committee starting to do some real work on this, And the Commission will actually, although it's meeting 4 times a year, it will meet again in 2 months' time to look at the list of priority projects, both social infrastructure as well as economic infrastructure. Put that list out into the public domain, we suspect, so that we know that these are priority projects, so that we know that whether it's an executive mayor or whether it's a bureaucrat within the Department of Environmental Affairs that has to give a record of decision, or whether there's a funding problem, that all the minds are in one room and all the levers are visible to be able to pull to get these things going again. Because we've seen a lot of project delays. We've seen a lot of projects that have been spoken about for many years that have just never been materialized. And I think the idea is to really elevate this to a level where there's a lot more visibility, there's a lot more coordination, and the emphasis of infrastructure as stimulus is given, pride of place within government.
Do you think the Commission has any chance of meeting its objectives of accelerating delivery?
Well, I think it's premature to say that and to comment, but I think all around the world, we saw it with President Obama's speech last night and elsewhere in the world, infrastructure is being put front and center in terms of what is next that governments can do to try and get our economies out of this post-recession sort of bubbling along the bottom. So people are turning to infrastructure. They're using what fiscal resources, limited fiscal resources remain to them. So sort of short-term stimulus and long-term consolidation becomes the mantra. So you try and stimulate this economy to grow again, to get these jobs coming through the economy. So I think it's part of a global trend to try and get infrastructure moving, to try and create the conditions for growth, and especially to employ people in the short term. Whether in South Africa this Commission is going to really deliver on the promise, and the promise is really about accelerating infrastructure delivery and actually delivering on what we've said we were going to do in terms of power and roads, etc. It's a matter for conjecture at this point, and we'll have to wait and see. But I think because so many things happen in a centralized fashion in South Africa, and we don't have this the power on the margins, maybe the fact that we're bringing it together and having all the heads knocked together in one place under the President's gaze could be a positive thing. But we'll have to wait and see.
Terence, thank you very much. That is the Second Take show for this week. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time for more news analysis.